Government Information Unit, GIU, is the communications arm of the government of Montserrat.
So we are going to have this panel session today. The title of the panel discussion is Impacts of the South Soufrière Hills Volcano Eruption, Lessons for Resilient Development. And we're going to have the following panelists. We have two panelists online. Jeremy Collymore, former CDMA Director and Regional Resilience Specialist. Dana Van Alphen, who is PAHO WHO. And then in presence, Lloyd Lynch, former UESRC Instrumentation Specialist and EWS and Science-Driven Resilience Expert. And then Mr. Jerome Meade from the Government of Montserrat, Chief Resident Planner. So I think we're going to proceed with we have a few framing questions, and the panel is going to last about 45 minutes. So I'll introduce a little bit more each of the panelists, and then propose the first question to the panelists, and then we'll move on from that. So Mr. Jeremy Collymore has deep expertise in policy and institutional capacity building, and especially in turning a crisis into opportunity. And he is, of course, perfectly aligned with exploring resilience lessons from Soufrière Hills Volcano. Dr. Dana Van Alphen brings a crucial public health and infrastructure perspective, and showing how volcano-triggered emergencies can strengthen health resilience systems. Lloyd Lynch, of course, can speak to the critical role of science and monitoring technology in preempting crises and informing resilient development after an eruption. And Mr. Meade is part of the Government of Montserrat. He's the Chief Physical Planner and definitely has a very good hand on exploring the issues for reconstruction on Montserrat in a sustainable with a sustainable strategy. And there are some issues, of course, for example, with respect to how what's the financial model of the island, and is this a hindrance to the future development. So we welcome Dr. Van Alphen online, and also Mr. Collymore online. I'm not sure whether you will be both able to speak at the same time, but anyway, the tech team is going to manage this. So the first question we thought that we could be exploring would be, if we look back at the early response and the long-term recovery from the Soufrière Hills eruption, what do you think were the most significant turning points or decisions that shaped Montserrat's path towards resilience? And we could have, the idea is that each panelist can have a few minutes to tackle this question, and then there might be an exchange, and then we can address the next framing question. So Dr. Van Alphen, perhaps? Michael, we don't hear. Hold on, because we can't hear you. Go ahead, let's try.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was just saying thank you very much for the invitation. And to get to the question, the original question, actually the Soufrière eruption had a catastrophic impact on the health sector. Not only the roads are blocked, the airport was closed, but Glendon Hospital, which is the only main hospital on the island, was in the exclusion zone. We saw a lot of patients with asthma, like respiratory problems and eye infection, and of course burns and medical emergencies that could not be treated on island. Additionally, the issues, the psychological impact, the mental health support needed was significant, and the shelter management where vulnerable groups would stay, especially the elderly, and we had a lot of teenage pregnancy. PAHO worked that time together with the Ministry of Health and other partners to organize the medical evacuation to Guadeloupe, Martinique, especially for the burns patients, and also to provide additional doctors and nurses from the other Caribbean islands. Medical supplies and masks were a problem, but they were not the main problem. The main problem was the staff. And it wasn't easy to find people, especially for psychological support. I remember we had some trouble there because some psychologists and psychiatrists, they were scared themselves of the volcanic eruption and didn't want to spend time on the island. What we learned in that time was the importance of the teamwork. The government of Montserrat and PAHO and FCO DFID that time, and the MVO, and the importance of the solidarity from the other islands. And in most Caribbean islands, in case of disaster, there is a need from expertise from outside. So other islands, but also from UK, additional expertise was brought in. We learned the importance of contingency planning and mass casualty management. And as infrastructure growth, the hospital, emergency hospital was established in the north in St. John's School. And I know now that Montserrat is in the process of building a new hospital, which started, the planning for it started a while ago. So I don't know if I answered the question. This is from my side.
Yes, I think that's very useful. Perhaps Mr. Collymore, your thoughts on those issues?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to engage on the issue of resilience in Montserrat. And for me, the issue of resilience allows us to frame the science context for evidence-based development and redevelopment. Because I'm making that point because the eruption took place a few years after the devastation of Montserrat and Plymouth in particular by Hurricane Hugo. So that, from my mind, raises the core issue about, in the context of this hazard, the science and how it impacted development. So the question that I asked then, and I'll still ask now, the extent to which that science was available and was used. Because when somebody did draw to my attention the map of this, and I asked myself, did they see this when they were developing Montserrat and Plymouth after the event? So it raises the science question. If the science is available, what is the process and issues that can facilitate its awareness and influence in the development decision making? And the second question that it drives to my mind is the single hazard lens of approaching redevelopment and recovery. And that, to my mind, is still a major problem, maybe except for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who've had repeated events of this kind. So I would like to suggest that when we are looking at redevelopment, we really think about it in the context of the hazard system of the country and not necessarily of the hazard type. That's one big lesson I think that we have learned from that. I could raise other questions, but I don't want to go forward. The only issue that I would say, and I'm trained with the scientists who are there, is, and I frame it this way, is it for publication and less on application? Is it science as tools or as toy? I throw that out for this big conversation given the character of this. But I will come back to some of the issues that I thought informed the rethinking of the opportunity and development to rebuild Montserrat after the Soufrière Hills Volcano. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We can come back to this last point that you made because there's been a lot of progress now in the simulations and in the risk modeling, which for future crises will be quite useful, including mass casualty simulations. Perhaps Mr. Mead, if you want to share with us your thoughts on this issue.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. In terms of resiliency, when I look at what the impacts of the volcano, I realize that almost 2/3 of the island was sterilized in the early stages when Plymouth was devastated, when you critically
not hear them.
Seems to be a problem.
Apparently, people online are not hearing the room.
Yeah, let me continue. In terms of our critical infrastructure, most of the economic activity and the lifeblood of Montserrat was lost during those early stages. And based on the science and evidence that we have going forward, based on my understanding, there is a safe north of Montserrat where we try to reestablish most of the development in this side of the island in terms of our main economic activity and our permanent buildings as well. In terms of that, how we identify and analyze the data to make more informed decisions is critical as we move forward. For example, even to sand mining as well, we looked at some aspects of going even further south based on the science and so on. And so on other activities that we would want to allow in that other southern part, like tourism, agriculture, and things that are not very permanent. Because we know that there is some possible land use and economic activity that can be had in those areas. So we want to embrace the science in a holistic manner and to plan effectively so that Montserrat can rebound in the best way possible to build the most permanent and resilient structures and have a model for other islands to see, because that's rare that a country can, as small as Montserrat, can be so resilient in terms of having almost half of the island sterilized and still able to exist in this one small 1/3 of the island and make it really feasible and pleasant for all of us here on the island. So I just want to say that we want to have timely data from the MVO so that persons understand the risks that could be had and the mechanism to support any kind of land use activity in those areas. So we have to work closely with both the MVO and the Disaster Management Agency in terms of understanding those risks so that we can plan effectively to build the most resilient structures going forward for the island. I don't know if I've answered the question, but I've tried to synergize where we want to go in terms of a small island development and to build in resiliency into the whole, taking risks and to build resiliency in planning going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Lloyd, how can science and technology make us more efficient in planning the next, the recovery and also potentially a future crisis here or in other neighboring countries?
Right, thanks very much. I wish to extend thanks to the organizers of the conference for inviting me. I retired last year, and it's nice to know that they are confident that I still can contribute. So I think coming out of the Montserrat eruption, one of the things that has had significant impact on disaster management in the Caribbean has been the creation of the Montserrat Volcano Observatory and the incorporation of scientists and the capacity to monitor the system on volcano. I wish, before I go on, to caution, however, that we should not get over-reliant on the science. Just this morning, I was having a discourse with a number of Montserratians who recognized me. I think there were about 7 of them. And they were confident that if the science says we can go back, then they 100% believe the scientists. I'm saying that because I do think that even though we have had 30 years of eruption, the whole question of what risk is acceptable to the key stakeholders has not yet been resolved. And in moving forward, I think we need to have a discourse that seeks to, some sort of convergence as to what level of risk is acceptable to HMG, the public, opposition politicians, the elected government, and maybe even the scientists. Good. This conversation, I think, could be helped with new technologies such as artificial intelligence. Interestingly, I've been out of the Montserrat circles, I think, since 1998. I, however, have taken a peek at the reports from time to time. But last night, when I was informed that I would be on the panel, I opened up Copilot on my laptop, and with a few prompts, I was surprised the amount of information I could get from AI. And I think the public needs to be sensitized that this resource is available. However, I also think that there are some things that are still missing. For example, a knowledge base on the risk-rewards issue that is required to inform that conversation on deciding on the level of risk that is acceptable. I don't want to go on any longer.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I noted down two points, and I think the Montserrat experience was particularly innovative in that sense. And several people showed this during the conference, is this notion of working on trying to quantify the individual risk versus the collective or societal risk, and trying to put the risk in perspective with risk ladders and probabilistic quantification. And this, I think, was the first time the Soufrière Hills crisis was the first time that these tools have been used, and Willie Aspinall and colleagues have been instrumental in developing this. So I would think that that's quite important to continue to pursue in this. And the other question I would ask the panelists is, we've seen in different research projects, and Constanza Bonadonna showed this in her advice project, that there is quite a value to do risk simulation that go all the way to quantifying the probability to exceed certain thresholds of, for example, number of buildings collapsing, number of buildings catching fire. We've done some of this work with Susanna Jenkins in Guadeloupe and Martinique a long time ago, and she's continued to do this in other projects. We can even go now to the typology of burns. that you could expect if an evacuation that is not implemented, if it doesn't, if something perturbs evacuation or the phenomena arise before. So, do you think that this is a way forward to go to transfer this science-based research to a more applied use in crisis planning?
Could I take that one?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Chair, yes, I think that's the point I was raising. I really thank Lloyd very much for concretizing it. But he raised two things that are important in how we manage that science application engagement. One was governance. And then he allowed to the issue of stakeholder engagement. I think I don't know if there's any documentation on the governance issues that inform the relocation in issues and decisions in Montserrat, but haven't seen them and be very close to that process. I think it was very much a live issue that has to be addressed in a multi-governmental, multi-governance process. And quite differently in that kind of environment. Now, to me, more particularly, one of the things that I found very interesting, even at the time, was an effort without the amount of science to think about, to be very conscious in selecting critical facilities location outside the volcano area. And of course, the implications of that for continuous relocation of the safe boundaries and the questioning of the science. So these are real issues that I think might be subtle, but they are critical to the process. And then I asked the question, to what extent were these governance issues compounded by the absence of a volcano plan at the time? Because when the event impacted, there was not one, but then we worked with Frankie Michael, who was there at the time, who was, I must say, were very robust in putting together a structure to get things to happen. So that's my reflection on connecting some of those issues that were raised there by Lloyd and the other interveners.
Dr. Alphen, do you have some additional thoughts?
No, not really, but I think there were a lot of, at least I participated, some of them when planning for the new hospital started. And I remember there were a lot of meetings and consideration of acceptable risk. And so maybe this stakeholder meeting was done at least for the hospital, if I remember well.
Okay, thank you very much. One point I would add is that we are in this regional context, and I know that in a previous project that we worked in Guadeloupe and Martinique, we noticed that there were different strategies for treating burns between Guadeloupe and Martinique. For example, in this cassava project that I was PI on, we talked with the risk with the emergency doctors, and in Guadeloupe they wanted to privilege a solution where you try to treat people in Guadeloupe, which there's only 6, I think, burns bed in Guadeloupe. You can make an additional 5 or 6. That was 15 years ago. But the idea was trying to treat them in Guadeloupe. And in Martinique, the idea was, because there were even less intense burns unit beds, they could only treat 2 or 3. So the idea was to stabilize the burns and then to send them to France or to England. And in talking with the doctors and the simulation that we did, we had let's say an evacuation that happened too late after the eruption. We had 130 third-degree burns. This is, as I understood, almost a global problem, because you cannot treat 100 third-degree burn at the same time. So isn't there a need to try to harmonize in the region the strategies for certain casualty responses?
I know that, I assume you're asking me.
Yeah, sure, Doctor.
I know that there is a regional inventory of burns bed because no country has sufficient burns bed.
Yeah.
Guadeloupe has 6. I think even Puerto Rico has 10. So it's not, once you speak about les grands brûlés, the big burns, each country has a different policy, but most of the patients need to be evacuated. And we had this discussion with SAMU in Martinique also, that they took the decision to evacuate to France. But the decision was taken after the Montserrat volcanic eruption. It was much later, like you say, 15 years ago with the SAMU. Eh?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
Eric Fontani.
Yeah. There is another question that we thought we could address today is the issue that in many small islands, resilience often clashes with limited resources and political pressures. So how do we move from reactive recovery to a proactive investment in long-term sustainable development, especially in high-risk zones? Perhaps Mr. Mead? Yeah.
Well, in terms of some of the high-risk zones, one mechanism we looked at is in terms of insurance would play a very big important factor to build confidence to deal with risk. For whatever, we noticed that in some aspects of the South, insurance on buildings are not really covered. But that is one factor to address that being able to recover from such hazards. And sometimes incentives from the government of Montserrat would make an effort as well to contribute to that effort as well.
Lloyd? Yeah.
All right. So I think moving forward, you need to first craft what I'd call a bulletproof plan that includes land use, that looks at issues such as what level of exposure you're going to allow, whether it includes recreation, mining, tourist activity. And along with that land use plan, you probably need a response plan for each activity. That will seek to reduce risks. So for example, should there be unrest that results in pyroclastic flow, the MVO could beforehand create a number of scenarios to look at the flows and the surges. You could create, for example, light shelters and train people to move to those light shelters rather than trying to escape the routes which may involve crossing the path of a pyroclastic flow. Good. So you need a bulletproof plan that addresses the land use, the preparedness, and of course, again, the public education is very important. People needs to know with this new opportunity that is opening up, what's in it for me? If I'm a tour guide, what does it mean for my long-term health? You know, taking people out into the area that, I'm exposed to ash. And, you need to have the capability to make that comparison. And this is all in seeking that convergence among the stakeholders as to what the level of risk. You could take it even further. I think the politicians probably won't want to hear this. By seeking a mandate, once the public is sufficiently educated, seeking a mandate to proceed. Design a few good questions related to the, reuse of the South, and put it on the ballot, maybe a referendum. Good. That way you'll get the mandate to construct that, that bulletproof plan, one that HMG most likely will consider. I know for fact from working with the government that HMG, for example, will not sit idly by and allow you know, any plan that is not bulletproof to be implemented to, you know, restore activities in the South. Anything that could, you know, embarrass the government. So I think that's the way forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Collymore?
Yes, I want to suggest that the CARICOM village is a good example of how even in the midst of crisis, there was a recognition of a need of opportunity to develop, to demonstrate how the issue of risk management can inform the development space. And really to move some of the typical response effort from supplies and emergency shelter to development opportunity. It's also important to note that a key exercise after that event was a vulnerability assessment, which helped to inform much of the development planning. So what I saw emerging in Montserrat really was a blueprint of how we address this recovery process, especially in a highly impacted environment, that allows for what I call strategic, resilient locational facilities and services. I don't know if it's ever been documented that way, but it's obviously an opportunity for research. Another outcome of that exercise, which I think has been undervalued or not sufficiently recognized, is the development of the National Volcano Plan that came out of that exercise. That was really a blueprint for framing similar developments in the other CDMA states or territories that have the volcano threat. So this issue that my colleague there, Lloyd, just spoke about, and I refer to the governance issue, is going to be very, very important. And how that is managed will reflect the extent of buy-in in the process of re-engineering the social and economic space and the impacted community. And I think it's a significant lesson for our social scientists to research.
Thank you. Dr. Alphen, do you want to add some points?
Yes, while I am in complete agreement with Mr. Lynch and Mr. Collymore, of course, governance is important. But is there such a thing as a bulletproof plan? Can we not start, because this meeting is about resilience actually, is it possible to start with smaller steps? And I just want to name one, that's because it's in my area. What about construction standards, building standards? They have to resist the volcanic ash, so the roof will not collapse, and they have to resist the next hurricane coming. So there are smaller steps that I don't think they take so long to implement. They take a while, all these steps. So before we get to an overall ideal plan, maybe we can start with smaller steps.
Yes, I agree. Actually, that's something I had noted on my while preparing for the panel. And I think one important issue is to make sure that these small steps are not antagonistic to other preventive measures for other risks or other hazards that are threatening the territory. So combining, preventive measures for volcanic hazard, for hurricane, and for earthquake, and to try to think in a holistic way to make sure that you don't have this opposition between preventive measures.
I don't think we'll be starting from scratch. In fact, some of those small steps that you described would have already been in place If you look at the Montserrat performance to COVID, I think it's very good, and it spells, that's attributed to the resilience that was already built up. So the island is already resilient. We should seek to improve that resilience by, or we can improve that resilience by a number of ways. I think one important thing is that we need to seize windows of opportunity. People like Frankie Michael, even the Chief Minister, who has a track record of mountain recovery from Hugo and performed creditably during the first phases of the eruption. His Excellency Frank Savage, who has indicated that he may be assigned to do some work in Montserrat, right? We have a window of opportunity to use the expertise of such people. Good. We have a lot more years behind us than what we have ahead of us. So there's a small window of opportunity to make use of that.
Yes. We have just a bit less than 9 minutes remaining in the panel. There were two other questions that were put forward. The next one would be, what are the lessons that Montserrat's experience could propagate in the Caribbean for other countries, especially in the context of increasing risk due to global change and geohazards, or vice versa? From what other experiences in the Caribbean could Montserrat benefit in its longer sustainable planning? Mr. Collymore, perhaps?
For me, one of the things that I was pretty keen in observing, because it's a new event for us, is the whole issue of displacement, of island displacement, and what that meant. I mean, initially there was a planning for probably a lot more people to move, for example, to Antigua. That amount of people wasn't realized, but there was a significant change in the population size, which had implications for the recovery process and services. So we really have to think not only about that implication for the local thing, but how do we manage displaced people to still provide that dignity? And that was a major challenge that I saw happening. It may not happen for a volcano, but we've seen several major impacting hurricanes in these small islands that put us very close to that kind of internal dislocation. And in some cases, interregional migration, for example, from Dominica to Antigua and so on after Irma and Maria. So we're beginning to see that these new dimensions of extreme or heavily impacted events are requiring us to think differently about what a disaster management system ought to be. And the call for the resilient Caribbean state has given us an opportunity to rethink as a region the adequacy of what we're doing. After Beryl, the whole question of a next level regional response mechanism was raised, but I would want to suggest that the Montserrat event gave a true test to the diversity of that experience, with the rebuilding troops from the region who helped to support some of the new facilities and also the Caribbean village. So there are lots of things there that we have identified that can be documented, shared, and promoted, with, of course, reflections on the current context.
Thank you. Additional comments from Lloyd or Mr. Mead?
Actually, if I may.
Oh, sorry.
Add,
yeah, please. Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I may add, is that lessons learned in Montserrat, they were taken into consideration in the last volcanic eruption in St. Vincent, because there were a lot of people with the experience from Montserrat, and they did incorporate that in their, I remember even the cleaning operation where they were cleaning the roofs of the ash and so the lessons from Montserrat, they did permeate into other situation and much more recent.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think there are several things that Montserrat could learn from itself. One that comes to mind is that in the past we had, attempts to, pressure to micromanage the crisis in seeking the interest of their constituents. Politicians, opposition politicians sometimes, make requests that if these requests were to be followed, the government would have to micromanage the crisis. And you don't want to micromanage a volcanic crisis because you do things like putting the lives of search and rescue people at risk. Right? So we could learn from things like that. Secondly, I want to say something about the science. Sometimes those very low probability numbers can be ignored and they come back to haunt you. So like the probability of Montserrat volcano reawakening was a very low probability, good? But from a scientific perspective, that probability was significant. Maybe from the societal or from, to the civilian authorities, it was not, good? To give an example, the Challenger space shuttle was assessed, the possibility of it crashing was assessed at a probability lower than Montserrat. And I think within the next few flights, it crashed. Good? So in moving forward, one of the things that we could do is to look at those low probabilities and in our bulletproof plan to make provisions for them. So like, for example, now, we know that the dome is very big. It's full of hot material. The guts are already filled. We are in a region where we can get earthquake activity that could have an impact on that system. For example, you could have large but low probability earthquakes, which can generate significant ground motion that could cause pieces of it to collapse. Good? Those are, you can't forecast those. Good? But you have to make provisions for them. You have to run some simulations and see what sort of effect they could cause and how to factor that into your plan, your response plan and so on. And the whole equation as to what risk is acceptable or not. Good? Also, you could have what we call smaller earthquakes with aftershock sequences. Very near to Montserrat, but because of that proximity, they could cause a series of smaller pyroclastic flows. Yep. Now, those may not be as fatal, but you could have several series of ash flow that could have a psychosociological effect on the people, well, the whole island for that matter. Yeah. So these are things that, you have to sit down and work out these things in moving forward.
Yeah, it's the very complex issue of cascading scenarios and then high impact, low probability events, the HILP, so-called HILP events. I'm afraid we only have basically a few seconds, so perhaps rapid closing statements from the next three panelists. We thank you, Lloyd, for your closing statements then.
Well, in terms of the science, I think it's very important that we respect data and to understand that this data is very important in terms of our development planning. And if we embrace it in a holistic manner and place it in a positive and enlightened agenda, it would help us to plan in a better way going forward.
Thank you. Dr. Alphen?
I can only speak about my area, of course. If we build a new hospital, let's build it to resist, because resilience means bouncing back. So we want a hospital that resists, doesn't need to bounce back.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Culmore.
I think there are significant lessons that have been identified. Some have been learned and some have been executed. But this is an ongoing process, and the foresighting must now be part of the process. And it's influenced by system thinking and systematic approaches. No longer the one hazard lens is appropriate for these small island states that are so highly vulnerable.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we didn't have time this morning for questions from the audience. But let's thank the panelists, Dr. Van Alphen, Mr. Cullimore, Mr. Mead, and Mr. Lloyd for their presence, and thank you for having joined us this morning.
Thank you.
Government Information Unit, GIU, is the communications arm of the Government of Montserrat. We serve as the official platform for news and information for and about the government's ministries and departments. We develop information products on government's policies, programs, projects, and activities, which are then channeled through various communication platforms. GIU, your official source for news and information on the Government of Montserrat.
Well, I know it's that time to tell the world what is Montserrat Prime. So sit back, I tell you that all the products are made in Montserrat. Let me tell you, cause you don't know, it's produced in Montserrat Expo. Why they choose this extempo thing, I hope the whole community can sing.
This is my message, so heed the call. Calabash and Prime is festival.
Prepare and bring plenty money. Come buy your oils, wine and even honey.
Arts and crafts with some baked goods. Chairs, beds, coffins, all type of woods.
Vegetables, nutmeg and spice. I tell you, all the gifts that Prime nice.
You are listening, so now you know this event will develop and grow.
Look how these vendors spend their good time creating products to sell at Prime.
Determination and hard work too. They toil and sweat to make them for you.
To make me tell you one more time, the only place for you to be is at Prime.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this presentation. The early years of the volcanic activity, Montserrat Children's BVI Stress Buster, Caribbean outreach at its best. I would like to thank Dr. Graham, Dr. Cowan, and the conference committee for the opportunity for us to play this small part in this conference, SHV 30. Further, I would like to add my personal welcome and thank you to all the delegates, to the first-timers to our shows, and especially to those who we view as our own, who are simply returning home. I wish to recognize the work of the mental health nurses, Dr. George Mahy, our visiting psychiatrist, psychologists, counselors, first responders, and social workers who were with us during the early years of the volcanic crisis. When discussing this presentation, we considered focusing on the basic counseling training program that was done with groups including primary and secondary school teachers, shelter managers, heads of households, youth leaders, a joint collaboration with the Montserrat Red Cross and the Montserrat Christian Council, with the ardent support of Father Larry, and many of us will remember Father Larry, and the then Bishop, now Archbishop Donald Reese. We also considered the debriefing session conducted with members of the search and rescue team, comprising mainly of, but certainly not limited to, members of the Montserrat Police and Montserrat Defense Forces. This was done following the traumatic situation that developed during the post-recovery of bodies after the June 25th, 1997 volcanic event. We continue to remember and share heartfelt gratitude to the search and rescue team, and indeed to all members of the forces for their stellar work. Then on to the various stress busters that allowed children and their chaperones to be able to enjoy brief breaks away from the ash, anxiety, and uncertainty that prevailed on the island. This morning, in looking back at those early years, we will highlight the trips, especially the one to the British Virgin Islands and St. Thomas USVI in 1996, through the eyes of sponsors, parents, chaperones, and children who participated then. Some of those children are present on the platform here, and we have two persons who are representing as parents at that time. Please note that this trip was by no means the only trip, and the others were no less significant. However, this trip was unique in that while some trips were supported by one agency or one church, this one involved an outreach from one lady, Carol Turnbull Hopkins, an extended to a women's group, to a community, and ultimately a multi-Virgin Island venture. From our experience with Hurricane Hugo and later the developments of the Soufrière Hills Volcano, we learned that disasters could bring out the good, the bad, and the ugly in human beings. This stress buster project, however, showed us that the absolute very best in humankind prevails. What was most remarkable was the speed and ease with which persons, agencies, and communities throughout the region reached out and took care of our children, affording the parents a chance to breathe a little easier, even for a brief period. We wish again to thank all parents and chaperones and sponsors, and especially those who accompanied the children on their overseas trips. I would like to remember at this point a parent chaperone, Mr. Joseph Morgan, who had a medical emergency and died while on the trip. Now, many questions came to mind for the parents as I recall the stress busters. First and foremost, what factors influenced their decisions to allow their children to go on this trip? How was it then for them while their children were away? And for the children, I wondered, what did they remember about the trip 30 years later, and what was their personal highlight? For both parents and children, were they still in touch with their hosts? Then I wondered just how difficult or easy it would be to replicate these trips in 2025. Now, before I have the panelists introduce themselves, I'd like us to start with one of our sponsors and the main project leader for our Stress Buster to BPI, Mrs. Lystra Osborne, who was the director of Red Cross at that time.
From the onset of the volcano, the Montserrat Red Cross was
committed and deeply involved in relief. We did a number of projects, which most of them were successful, but one that is outstanding to me is the program in which we sent 453 children from Montserrat for stress busters over to the Caribbean islands, all free of charge and all expenses paid by somebody. I can tell you who they are, but yet the big thing about it is the families who hosted these children came forward so willingly and did that for us, for our children. In the summer of 1996, the Jamaica Red Cross advised us that they would like to have a group of 45 of our children who were living in shelters or in crowded conditions to come to Jamaica and to spend 2 weeks of their vacation. They were going to be hosted by parents who had children around the ages of the children that were going to be there. And this was the very first overseas trip that we had with the children. 9 trips in all. 453 children from Montserrat went overseas for their vacation. I'll give you a rundown of the islands that assisted us. In August of 1996, 45 children went to Jamaica. In the Christmas of 1996, we had the bumper one of 145 children going to Tortola, Virgin Gorda, and St. Thomas. And then Antigua had 25 children. That was 1996. In August of 1997, 50 each went to Barbados, to St. Lucia, Cuba, Cayman Islands, 20 went to Jamaica, and 10 to Borneo. Return passages to and fro Antigua were covered by the government of Montserrat. For the first trip to Jamaica, half of the airfares was paid for by the governor's office, and the other half was provided by LIAT and BWIA as it was at that time. For the second voyage to Jamaica and those to Cayman Islands, Barbados, St. Lucia, and Cuba, Air Jamaica gave these fares entirely free of cost. The Women's Guild of Tortola was a group that played a big part in the Tortola trip. This and advertised that they would like to have some children as a stress buster, and Dr. Carol Tewitt was resident in Tortola at the time, and they liaised with her, and she liaised with us. That is the Montserrat Red Cross. And they eventually got so many requests for children that they had to stop. So it was 145 children went. It was a tremendous success.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask one of the parents, whichever one would like to start first, just tell us a little bit about what factors led to them allowing their children to travel.
Hi, good morning. I'm actually one of the parents whose daughter had traveled to BVI. And like all other parents, you know, you would have some concerns concerning your first child going away from you. But then for me, it was much easier because my brother-in-law was living there at the time as a pastor who has moved there for some time before. So it was much easier on me to be part of that trip, sending my daughter as a part of that trip, because I know that she would be in safe hands. And so it wasn't that hard for me like probably other parents to do that. So, I was basically comfortable with her going.
Okay, thank you. Tiffany?
Good day, my name is Tiffany Williams. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother. She said that one of the reasons why she felt comfortable with us going is the fact that Dr. Carol Truitt and Sharon Edwards, who was working at the Montserrat Red Cross at the time, were known to her and she knew them very well. So she felt comfortable with us going. However, she had mixed feelings because at the time the volcanic activity was at its peak and there was a lot of uncertainty surrounding it. So she felt sort of torn with the fact that, okay, her two children, me being 6 at the time and my sister being 8, weren't safe in Tortola. They weren't in Montserrat. But she also felt her motherly instinct to, always wonder how were they coping with total strangers? Were they being fed properly? Were they comfortable? And also the fact that me and my sister were not staying in the same place. We were actually split up when we were in Tortola. So that was one of the reasons why she felt a little bit torn.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Wade.
For me, my name is Idris Pamela Wade. For me, it was very emotional and traumatic because at the same time, I've grown up in Gauges where we heard about the volcano and we live on the flanks of the volcano. We did not know what to expect. There was a lot of emotional roller coaster with me and my family. So when the invitation came from the Red Cross for children to go, I felt relieved. I did not know what to expect because it was my only child I have to send away. My nieces and nephew who lost their mother during the crisis of illness. And also, I put my trust in God and said, where there is a way, there is a will. And I sent my family out to Tortola, Cayman Island, and some of the other islands because we had a couple of them. And as I said, it was very nerve-wracking. I did not know what to expect. I was wondering if those persons going to take care of my child as how I would want to take care of them. I suffered a loss of separation because I always have my daughter and my family with me, but they across the waters not knowing what to expect. But however, when I made contact with the families, they gave me the assurance that they're going to take care of my daughter and my children. And apart from that, as I said again, I felt relieved that they were out of the situation because since I did not know what to expect, I did not want them to suffer the wrath of the volcano because I believe they are young and they could live life. I already lived my life. So what had happened, they could pursue to becoming what they want to come.
Thank you. He's not there.
Hi, my name is Yolanda McCoy. I'm a member of the Women's Guild.
Hi, my name is Jutta Scatliff. I'm a member of the Women's Guild.
Hi, my name is Ishma Reimer. I'm a member of the Women's Guild. Okay, the idea came, was one of our members' brainchild, Miss Carol Turnbull Hopkins. She thought that it would be nice to invite about 5 or 6 children within her immediate family who they could stay and have a good Christmas because it was in December that we did it and we thought that the children Christmas should really enjoy Christmas and not have to deal with eruption of volcano and stuff like that. So she decided to throw it out to the public. She threw it out within the church. She threw it out to organization. She also went on the radio station and let them know what the thoughts were, what the plans were, and if who were interested, that they could reach out to us. And from that, people really were well willing and wanted to be a part of the process. At the time, Dr. Carol Tuitt was here and she was a monstration. So the same Carol Hopkins, she reached out to her and asked for her assistance and to make contact on the other end in Montserrat to the families, the church, the Red Cross. And that really blossomed. Instead of 5 kids, it went up to like 15 and it kept growing. And I think the final count was approximately 140 kids. And people were really willing and anxious to host these kids. Some families had 1, some families had 2. There were some families that even had 3. And there were some families who were upset that they were not able to assist because we had more people willing to host than what children. I think the Rotary or the Red Cross in St. Thomas also was part of this process. So they arranged the tours. Then I remember they was going to Coral World. They did a tour around the island. At that time, there was this restaurant up on Steep Hill Banana something. I remember we went there, spent quite a while. We also took them to the mall, which they were fascinated. They had a little spending change. They bought little things for themselves. And then we head back to the boat and back home. But all in all, I remember coming up on the boat, they had such a nice time. Some fell asleep, but they had a good time, yeah.
Okay, I'd like now to introduce 2 of our children 30 years later.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamil Melissa Greenaway, and I was an attendee on the trip to Tortola in December 1996, and ultimately returned to Tortola a couple months later, where I resided for about a year.
Good morning. I am Jamelia Greenaway. I wasn't on the initial trip. I was first in Grenada, but then a few months after, I joined my brother and my sister in Tortola.
Now, I just want you to know that in June, on the 25th of June, 1997, I got several calls in the office from people who hosted children in Montserrat, in Tortola, from Montserrat, asking me to immediately get in touch with the parents and have them come out of Montserrat following that, terrible eruption. So it was many of those host families who eventually had children come back, and many ended their school life, their secondary school life in BVI as a result of that initial meet. Okay.
The offer by the BVI to not only host but cover the cost of the children and accompanying adults came at a time of great socio-economic upheaval in the country. People had been forced to move from their homes and were living in all sorts of shelters or with friends and families. Some persons had lost their livelihood, for example, the farmers. The atmosphere was fraught with fear because persons were not sure if they were truly safe. As well, there were underlying tensions for various reasons, including the unaccustomed and uncomfortable accommodation in most cases. The offer provided a most welcomed respite for those who were provided with the opportunity to go to the BVI. Those who were assigned to the group were quite accommodating, and individuals were well looked after. It is fair to say that they were treated properly because there were no complaints. In fact, different activities were organized to help persons to relax and enjoy a different atmosphere, even if only for a while. These also helped to promote an enriching and rewarding experience for the children. One such activity involved a day trip to St. Thomas. The group traveled by means of a relatively high-speed ferry over calm waters. On arrival in St. Thomas, they were taken to the mall where gifts for relatives could be purchased. Most of the children had never experienced shopping in a mall up to this point, and so it was an enlightening experience which exposed them to what was possible, even though up to that point, Montserrat was still reeling under the onslaught of the volcano. The hand of friendship extended during one of the worst moments in the history of Montserrat and the lives of its people is highly commendable and will always be remembered.
Okay, that was Dr. Judith Baker, who was one of the chaperones on that particular trip.
The children were taken over to Tortola. They visited Virgin Gorda, St. Thomas. Unfortunately, I, as president, was invited to spend a weekend. So Sharon Edwards, who was then secretary, and I went for a weekend to see firsthand what was the accommodation, how the children were being treated. And we were amazed at the outpouring of love and concern that these mothers and friends that they never knew before showed to our children. We went on the ferry, Sharon and I, along with the children and their chaperones. We went over to St. Thomas on the ferry and spent the day there. And they came back, and those children were treated. The Rotary Club had on a big Christmas party for them. And the good thing about it all is today, a number of those children are still in contact with their host families. Friendships were formed.
Any comment? Any of you?
Right, so if I can speak very briefly about my trips to Tortola. So as Dr. Tewitt and the other presenters referenced, several of us went to Tortola in December 1996, which for me personally at that time, I think I'd only ever been to Antigua and St. Martin. So it was a new experience for me, traveling with other children, several other children, some of whom I did not necessarily know, and considering the time at which we were traveling, leaving our family behind. But, as a 13-year-old at that time, it was a welcome experience. I appreciated it. So as you may have heard, we went to BVI, and they ensured that we were always kept occupied, a welcome distraction from what was happening back in Montserrat. So I vaguely recall the trip to St. Thomas where we did do shopping. It was a new experience. And I think we also had the opportunity to visit Virgin Gorda. And, for someone like me who loves seeing new places, it was quite the experience, and I do recall enjoying that. Now, if I may segue into my return to the BVI. Well, before I get there, I was fortunate enough to have two brothers in Tortola. Around the time when, the trip came up, that's when I discovered I had two brothers who were from Tortola. But at the time I visited, they had already migrated to the US. So that was an added bonus of being granted the opportunity to go to Tortola. Now, in 1997, I well, before I got to Tortola, I made a brief stop in Grenada, where I went to school for a week because the company my mother worked for had migrated to Grenada. So I went to Grenada and for about 2 weeks, went to school for a week. That was not working. I do not know the details of why it was not working. Anyway, I ended up moving over to Tortola with my sister, that's my sister Jamelia, and my brother to live with one of our step-mothers, because my brothers were, they had two different mothers. But anyway, so we resided with her for a year, and we were able to attend school, which it was different to Montserrat. The environment was different. I had to get accustomed to living in a new space, but I must say that the welcome from students, teachers, it was a positive representation of what a Caribbean island is, what an overseas territory is, because at no time did we feel like we did not belong, and I was immensely grateful for that experience. So that was around, I think I was supposed to enter second form at that time, but I was poor at math, I was supposed to enter third form at that time, but I was very poor at math, so I had to redo math in second form. Nonetheless, I did enjoy it. I felt like I belonged there. And I saw it as a place that I could, remain. But like I said, it was only for 1 year. In 1998, we returned to Montserrat. And I was fortunate enough to encounter some people who had gone to school in Tortola around the time I went to school there, and I can at least recall one person with whom I've had a lasting connection because we both went to school in the BVI, and we have memories of that, that trip. Now, as I indicated, I came back to Montserrat. But one of the major takeaways from that trip, now the lady that I stayed with at the time, she passed several years ago, but what I can say remains with me is that I had the opportunity to discover that I had siblings in Tortola, which I greatly appreciated, and I can say to this day, one of my brothers who I was able to get in contact with, we do remain in contact until this day, so I can only continue to express gratitude to Dr. Carol Chewett and all the other facilitators who allowed me to experience to undergo such a rewarding experience, essentially.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you. We have two students, children, who were on the trip but are now in the UK. So we start with Chanel.
Hello everyone, my name is Chanel Riley. I am from the village of St. Patrick's. I cannot believe it's coming up to 30 years of celebration from when the volcano first started. I was one of the students, or should I say one of the children, who was given the opportunity to actually go to different Caribbean islands. The island that we went to was Tortola, and our host, Miss Smith, was so accommodating at that time. It was a new experience because I didn't fly, never had that opportunity until it came, and I think it did me good in understanding that there's a lot more, but still miss beautiful Montserrat. I just cannot believe how much we've all remembered and taken from that event that took place 30 years ago. My best part, I would say, when I was in Tortola, we got the opportunity to perform. We had a concert. We also went to St. Thomas. I can't remember the full name of the beach, but it was the heart-shaped beach. That was absolutely beautiful. Those were the fun memories for me. Yes, we did the shopping, but I think nature was my thing. So I was so engrossed by all the different plants and flowers. It was really good experience. And I think this is what's led me to the profession that I've sort of used my hands creating different designs in floristry, which I've taken on as a profession and a qualification. So yes, good things happened out of Montserrat, and I'm here living proof to show for it. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Okay, and we go right on.
Hello everyone, my name...
I'm Glenroy Foster. And almost 30 years ago, I was one of the children that had the opportunity to take part in a stress buster trip to the British Virgin Islands, facilitated by the Red Cross. Back in 1996, at the height of the volcanic crisis, the stakeholders felt that they needed an initiative for children to be children. And they put on this trip that would allow children to spend time away in Christmas of 1996 with families in the British Virgin Islands. I was fortunate enough to went to a very good family that later on I actually went back to the BVI and spent a year there. But first, let's talk about the trip. The trip itself was very good. It allowed the children, me in particular, to get to experience initiatives and activities that we didn't have here on island. I could say that that was the first opportunity I had to sit in a movie theater and watch a movie. That movie was Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger, that Christmas movie. So it provided that opportunity to see things, experience things, and have fun at the height of the crisis, where you had a lot of stresses being felt, especially by the adults. So they wanted to have an opportunity for children not to be exposed to that. Similarly, I had the opportunity firstly to go over to St. Thomas, the first time being in the USVI via a boat trip from Tortola. This again was a good opportunity, get to see a different country, and as a child you're allowed to see something that is exciting, different to what you were seeing on Montserrat at the time, which was a lot of ash and dust and movements. Fortunately, I was not one to be in shelters, but we were displaced, as I was from Amos Gut beyond the bridge, so I was displaced to living with relatives in St. John's. So again, that is something that you weren't accustomed to. So this trip allowed us to detach ourselves from that situation and just be children. As I said before, because of the foster family that I had there, or sponsor family, whatever title they had at the time, I actually went back to the BVI and spent a year living with them and going to school. So I actually spent my final primary school years in the BVI, going to Seacowards Bay Primary School, and enjoying myself at that time. So it allowed me to have a different experience. So the experience of going to the BVI was a great one. It allowed me to meet new people, interact differently, and enjoy myself as a child, away from what was transpiring in Montserrat at the time. And I do feel that that initiative was very good for all of the children that had the opportunity to be exposed to it.
Greetings all. I am Christopher Fenton, originally from Salem, Montserrat, now residing in the United Kingdom. So this video, I will be reflecting on my trip to the Virgin Islands in 1996. So, in my mind, I traveled from Montserrat on Boxing Day. And this was to join a group of children who had already traveled to the Virgin Islands. I heard of this trip, and when given the opportunity, I seized on it. I was like, yep, it would be good to have a break and to travel. So I accepted. So we got to Tortola and we spent the night. I stayed with a host, and she was a Tortola native. And she took me to see my niece, because I had a niece who resided in Tortola at that time. And that was good because I haven't seen her for a little while. And the following day, we traveled by ferry over to St. Thomas. So In St. Thomas, we stayed with the Grinoways. So Clem Grinaway and Rose Grinaway, who are Montserratians who are living in St. Thomas. Mrs. Grinaway is no longer with us, but I'll touch on that a bit later on. So I will speak about on 3 or 4, vivid memories that I have. And I'll start with the food. Mrs. Grinaway was an excellent cook, and her food was nothing short of amazing. I can remember that much. I also remember her baking. Like, her baking is different levels. Like, she made the most amazing Christmas cake I've ever had in my life. I do not like Christmas cake. I do not eat Christmas cake. Too sticky, too gooey. That's not my thing. However, she blends all the ingredients together. So when that mixture comes out, it's just a nice, smooth consistency, almost like plain cake. So when you ate that, Christmas cake, it was amazing. And I don't think I've ever had a Christmas cake as good as that since. So bless us all. I remember us, going to church. Mrs. Greenaway is a strong Christian lady, so she took us to church. Obviously, we did stuff like touring the island, visiting her sister, because she had a sister who also lives in St. Thomas. So I remember us visiting them, for dinner one evening, doing several different tours around the island. I remember President Bill Clinton was visiting St. Thomas around that time as well. So that was the first time I ever got to see Air Force One. It was like, parked up at the airport. So you could see it when you were driving by. And, one day when we were doing a tour, I don't know if we were coming from the beach or something, but as we were going up a hill, we could look over onto the Gulf Coast. And there was President Clinton, in the distance, playing golf. So that was pretty cool, seeing a sitting president, even not, up close and personal, but we still saw him, so that was cool. I remember the trip from the Tortola, the group that was staying in Tortola came over to St. Thomas on a day trip. And that was good, meeting up with the others, we did tours, went shopping, just last week, I actually saw an item that I purchased on that trip. I know I'm a different kind of hoarder. I don't like throwing away things. My wife will attest to that. It was a good experience, because as you know, that was like the beginning stages of the volcano. I was only 16 years old, a lot on the trip or even younger. However, it was a very pressured time because I was in fifth form, just getting ready to do my O-levels, etc. So it was a good opportunity to have a break and just relax your mind from all the stresses from the volcano, so definitely appreciate, those who were involved in organizing this trip. That was, something that we needed. One other thing I remember, we did a radio interview on one of these St. Thomas radio channels, just speaking about our experiences, and that was pretty good. And we even got to visit a store owned by, a sports store owned by a Montserratian who resided in St. Thomas, and she gifted us some items, so that was pretty cool. So back to the Grinaways. So I am still in touch with the Grinaways. Mr. Grinaway. Mrs. Grinaway unfortunately passed several years ago. But, I did manage to see her. One year I was in Boston and I was attending a funeral, and she was also at that funeral. And we got to meet. That was the first time I had seen her since '96, and it was pretty good seeing her. Catching up, and just thanking her for all that she did for us. Mr. Grinaway is a big WhatsApper. So all these older generations, they're way into the technology more than us. So he WhatsApps me quite regular, so we do communicate. And interestingly, back in 2009 when I got married, I did my honeymoon in St. Thomas, St. John, and I got to see Mr. Griner when I visited St. Thomas again. And at that time, he was still doing his taxiing. So he took us on a tour around the island, so it was good catching up with him, So thank you, Mr. Griner, for everything.
Okay. Yes, I know that we're very close to the end because of our time. Now, just so you know, because we lost our slot yesterday, we've had more videos because some persons were not able to be here today. However, what we're going to do, there's going to be a break now, and a few of the other videos will be shown. But just before, if there's anything that the panelists would like to say to wrap up.
I just want to say thanks to the persons and the organizers who had helped us to take our children away from the stress. And today, we have made good bond with some of the families that one of my nephews still live where he went in Cayman and is a Caymanian. He got his national passport from Cayman. He lives there. And also, my daughter Sajisa said that she'd have to say thanks to all the persons who had helped her because she have vivid memories, fun-filled memories that is etched in her book of life. She would always remember those days. And I say thanks a lot for the Red Cross and the organizers.
Yeah, I too want to say thanks to the organizers for allowing my daughter to go to BVI and for relieving us, relieving her with that stress from the volcano activities. But looking back at 30 years on now, she's back now in the BVI as a medical technologist at the hospital. So she's presently now working there.
To follow in the footsteps of the other panelists, I just want to again say thank you to Dr. Carol Truitt, the Montserrat Red Cross, and the facilitators in the BVI, and just to again stress how important that trip was for us. I can recall that I do have friends in the BVI still who, and it's not that I necessarily met them in the BVI. In London, for example, when I relay the story of my experience in the BVI, that has served as the foundation for what I consider lasting relationships even to this day. So there's someone that I met in London in 2019, and we happened to be going to the same school. We encountered each other, and I relayed my story of the BVI, and as a result of that, I strongly believe, and the fact that he's convinced that he helped me navigate London and took me under his wing, but that is just an example of the lasting effect that such a trip has had for some of us Montserratians.
Okay, well, I think that we're going to break there so that you can have your break. However, I guess we can run the other videos of the other persons who are absent, and then if there are any questions, we can answer them during the break. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a little modification from what you said. So we have a modified program, so we're going to have one presentation now. Then there'll be a 10-minute break. It's just a drink break, no snacks. The lunch will be a bit earlier. And so we'll have the pleasure to have Mr. Christian Raffa, who will talk about the Saint-Pierre, Martinique, and Montpellier memory revival and the mayor's challenges between development, risk, and responsibility. And I'll have Jérôme Vergne, who is the director of the Volcanological and Seismological Observatory of Martinique, to introduce Mr. Raffa with a few words. Sorry. Well, you can do the introduction.
Yeah, I can do quickly the introduction now. So Mr. Arfa is the mayor of Saint-Pierre for a while already. He just sent me a message